This is Benny Friedman. He was our guide last time we were allowed to have tours in Israel.
A long time ago.
And but today we've got Benny for Jerusalem, and I couldn't ask for a better guide. And I'm so glad you're here with us, brother. City of David. Let me tell you all about City of David. Actually, no. He's going to tell you all about City of David because I'm clueless. Welcome to the City of David, and welcome Benny Friedman.
Thank you very much.
So first thing we want to talk about is we're kind of underground here, but not really. We're standing at almost the peak of the mountain. Just behind us that direction is the Temple Mount, which tells us, if we open up our Bibles and we read about the city of David, we know that King David built his palace at the northern end of this hill. So if you look around here, if you pan around, you'll see all sorts of ruins and remains of buildings. We have two theories going on here. We have what we split up the country or the archaeological world into minimalists and maximalists. And you guys get to choose if you want to be a minimalist or a maximalist. I'm going to go with the maximalist, and I'll explain to you why it's the right decision.
All right.
When we talk about minimalists and maximalists, we're talking about a school of thought within the archaeological world here in Israel and the whole world, really. And maximalists, this is the head of it in Israel, in Jerusalem, the Hebrew University, and they use the Bible and archaeology to authenticate the biblical story, or to at least find different sites throughout the land. Minimalists will also do that, but they'll also use archaeology to disprove or at least minimalize the Bible and its authenticity. So when we look in the Bible and it says King David built his palace at the northern end of the hill, and you don't find a palace, it's a little bit of a problem for the authentication of our scripture.
Yeah.
But when you dig and you find a massive structure, now it doesn't look that big. I mean, some people have living rooms bigger than this in America, because as we all know, all Americans are rich. That's what Israelis think. I know it's not true. I'm an American myself, never been rich, but this is by far the largest building in the city of David. Okay, it's also at the northern end. Now, there's a few reasons why kings would build their palaces at the northern end, or at least the highest point on the mountain, which in this case is the northern end. Number one, you can look down over the people you're ruling. Now, when you're talking about medieval Europe, you always find the castle on a hill, and the king's looking down, and all the peasants can't get in. He's got all the food. I don't think that's why King David built his palace at the end. If you look at the city of David on a map, it's kind of shaped like this with the city of David on top. You got deep valleys on all sides, so the only way to enter Jerusalem is through the north. And in fact, Jerusalem has only ever been taken from the north. There's two times in history it was not taken from the north. They were taken from the east, and both times was by Israel. King David was the first, and the Israeli paratroopers in 1967.
He was there.
There you go.
He was a paratrooper.
And he had to climb up this steep hill to get in there.
I think he floated down.
So two times taken from the east, both times by Israel. So every time in history, and guys, Jerusalem's been taken many times in history, it's always from the north, because that's the easiest way to enter the city. So a king putting his big palace on the northern end, to me, says, I care about my people. I'm not like those medieval kings who are hiding with their towers and their castles and an impenetrable wall, but King David is saying, you got to go through me to get my people. That's the way I like to see it. And that's why we have this massive fortification, which is a palace. You can see as we go through the city, the walls here are going to be a lot thicker than all the other walls. Like any other king, he's going to have water systems, storage rooms, things like that, throughout the palace to facilitate his needs, his people's needs, and you know, you do get some perks being king and having extra baths in your house and things like that. Yeah. Now I want to talk about this sign right here. We'll read it in case you can't see it back home. But before we read it, you can see on top, there's on the left-hand side what looks like the remains of a coin. It's called a boule stamp. And on the right, a picture of what it would have been attached to. This is an official document of the king. Okay, so I'm going to read it. And there's an inscription on the boule, and we'll come back to that in a second. But this is from the book of Jeremiah. It says, and Zedekiah the king sent Jehukal the son of Shemaiah and Zephaniah the son of Messiah, the priest, to the prophet Jeremiah, saying, pray now unto the Lord our God for unto the Lord our God for us. From Jeremiah 37, verse 3. And then it continues to say, at this spot, a bulla, an imprint in clay used to seal documents, was found. The bulla bears the name of Jehukal, son of Shelemiah, son of Shovai, one of the royal officials of King Zedekiah, who ruled over Judah at the time of the destruction of the first temple. The bulla of another royal functionary, Jedaliah, son of Pashul, from Jeremiah chapter 38, verse 1, was found nearby. So this little bulla and many others just like it were found in this area, more so over there, and we'll go there in a couple minutes. Not only showing us that some sort of important person lived here. If we're talking about kings, kings would have official seals and things like this in and around their palace. So this is telling us someone important, an official or a king lived here, but now it's name-dropping people that were actually found in the book of Jeremiah. Right. If that doesn't start to authenticate our biblical story, I don't know what does. Now, just to kind of explain what this form is or what the document is, this is an official contract that would be found in the king's palace or in a room attached to the king's palace. And what it is a type of contract that you have two ends. You can see one is sealed up with the bulla seal, which is that stamp telling you who was the official person sealing it with his name. And here we have Jehukal, son of Shelemiah, who is the man sealing it up. And the other side is opened. You put the same thing on the contract, the one on the open side, one on the sealed side. And if you want to see and say, let's say Joshua tampered with the contract, the open side says this, but I don't believe it. I think he came in after hours, paid the guard, and changed the contract. We can break the seals and we can read the sealed contract. This is something that we find in the ancient world and usually going to be around the either mayor back then, ruler, or the king.
On their ancient hard drive.
Exactly, exactly. So that's telling us this structure is more important than all the other ones that we're going to see around here. Someone important lived here. Now, if we're talking about the maximalists say, well, we just name dropped some people here. We know they're kings of Israel. Kings of Israel are going to be living in the king's palace, the big building at the top of the hill. If you're talking about minimalists, they'll say, well, it's a ruler's house, not really the king. They'll also say King David wasn't a big ruler like we read in the Bible. He may have been a local chieftain type king, but didn't really venture out from this area. Nonetheless, we both agree that this is some ruler's house, but I like to think it's King David's. We're now sitting at the guest center of the city of David. Sorry, we're standing at the guest center of the city of David. And we're sitting right in front of a replica of some tiles that was found in the valley just over here to my right, your left. And this was a project that's been going on for quite some time now. Just behind you is the Temple Mount. And a few years back, 20 years or so, Yasser Arafat, if you guys remember him, decided that he wanted 1 million pilgrims to come to the Temple Mount during the month of Ramadan. But there wasn't enough space and there weren't enough mosques for everybody to pray at. So he started this huge job of building mosques all around. And he chose one location. Today, we know it as Solomon's Stables. No stables for Solomon, but just the name the Crusaders gave it. And he started to dig up all the dirt, and for lack of time, he just threw it all into the valley. A very famous archaeologist here in Israel, Gabriel Barkai, professor, decided to take all that dirt and start a sifting project on the Mount of Olives. And he started sifting all that dirt, and amongst the many, many treasures that he found, this was one of them. This is a replica. The original, once again, sits at the Israel Museum. And this is put together from the tiles that were found in the area, like I said, of Solomon's Stables, which would have been from the Second Temple period. Now, it wouldn't have been inside the temple, so would have been the courtyards. Exactly. Wow. This is the area that everybody would have been walking around in as you approach. You come up through the gates up into the Temple Mount, and this is the area that the grounds that it looked like. Yeah, beautiful Roman-style mosaic. But of course, notice that there's no images in it in order to make it kosher for the Temple Mount. Lack of a better term's sake. So beautiful designs. So a minute ago we were standing up top over there, and that's the area that we call King David's Palace / the ruler's palace or house. And here we're on the eastern side of the mountain. So everything that we're going to see over here is from King David and on, and this will continue all the way down the mountain. When we talk about the city of David, remember David had a capital city before Jerusalem, Hebron. He took the city of Jerusalem to unify the tribes for the first time and choose a location that didn't belong to anybody in order to make it his capital. And this was a Jebusite city called Yevus. And this wall that you see right over here was the retaining wall of that city. So that's by far the oldest part here. And when he took the city, he used that wall to retain his palace. And as the city flourished, he needed to expand. Now we see these structures over here. These structures are all attached to the palace. And we talked about the Bula coins up top in the palace. This is an area that many of them were found, which tells us this is most likely, we'll call it the archives of the king, or the administrative center of the king. Whoever lived here was serving the king, their masters above. If you needed some sort of document or record, you don't want your carrier boy to run all the way down to the bottom of the mountain and all the way back up. He might not return. So you get the administrative center somewhat close or attached to the palace, and it's good for business. Now the cool thing about archaeology, what we mentioned up top, coming from the perspective of the maximalist, is we can look at it and we can see, number one, when this part of the city was destroyed, and see if we can find any sort of artifacts that authenticate our biblical story for us. So we can use modern science, and we have. Any sort of site has a destruction level, and it's hard to see right now, but this area is actually covered in a layer of black soot from the destruction of the city. Now we know it was destroyed by fire. Most places are going to be destroyed by fire back then. And it leaves this layer that you can actually carbon date. You can also carbon date all the things like coins that are made out of clay that we find, or they weren't coins, but the stamps, and arrowheads. This area was littered with arrowheads, both Israelite and Babylonian. So we know, according to the Bible, Jerusalem was destroyed for the first time by the Babylonians, and this will tell us they were here. You can authenticate our biblical story by using that, but also the time that we date our arrowheads to by using carbon dating. I had a college professor, Dr. Barkai as well, and he was very funny. In class, he said, carbon dating is very, very accurate. It gets you to plus minus 10,000 years of the event. And it's very accurate. Now, so it's not that accurate, but it pinpoints a time period for you, and then we know it's a Babylonian arrowhead. So it's starting to authenticate our story for us. The destruction of this city, King David's city, was done by the Babylonians.
I remember reading that, outside of excavations, we didn't have any proof that King David exists. Exactly. Like only the Bible. Like only our Bible, we take on faith.
Yeah.
Now we're here in potentially what probably is King David's palace.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Now, since then, we have, this is a while ago, we did find up north in a city called Tel Dan, a stone that had King David's name on it. Nothing to do with King David. In fact, it's almost 300 years after his death. But they name dropped him.
Yeah.
And this is a king named Hazael, who destroys the northern kingdom of Israel, comes all the way almost up to the the area of the tribe of Judah, although they didn't rebel against them, to the area of Bet Shemesh. And on that conquest, he puts a stone in the city of Dan to warn everybody not to do this again. And he doesn't mention any names of the kings that he attacked. He says the house of David.
Wow.
That means almost 300 years after King David's death, in this area, there is no other king. I've heard of this King David. He's the only one that matters in this area.
Wow.
So if you're talking about a local chieftain, why is a guy in Aram, way up north, modern-day Syria, talking about the house of David almost 300 years after his death?
Wow.
Yeah, so this man was a significant character. And that's, following the biblical story, where we know King David pushed our borders all the way up to modern-day Syria. Yep.
made it through the tunnel, very short tunnel where I smacked my hat off the wall. And we made it to the well, the Hasmonean well, and I think Benny's gonna tell us a little more about it.
All right, so we're still in the Kidron Valley, and we've gone from the city of David underground all the way up, following the cisterns and the well systems. Before there was King Herod, there were the Hasmoneans, and they used nature. They didn't build Roman aqueducts. They didn't bring water from different areas. As you saw, it was raining earlier. All you have to do is collect the water that God gives you, and you can have that for the rest of the year. This is the system, that well that Joshua just mentioned. And it continues in this direction and continues all the way down. And it would have brought water to the pool of Siloam from Hezekiah and onwards. But this area is a very special spot for us. If you have your Bible, you can turn with me to the book of Exodus, chapter 28. Now, we're reading from Exodus, but I'm going to be referencing Second Temple period, the Roman destruction. We talked about the Babylonian. We saw some remains of that. Now we're standing in Second Temple period, just underneath the western wall. It's just over in that direction, meaning we're at the footsteps of the Temple Mount. And here on this poster, you can see what looks like a little charm or a pomegranate. This is a pomegranate that was attached to a garment. Now, the reason why I want to read from Exodus 28 is that it'll explain what this is. Exodus 28, verse 33 says, "On this bottom hem make pomegranates of blue, purple, and scarlet, and put them all the way around, with gold bells between them all the way around, gold bells. Pomegranate, gold bell, pomegranate, all the way around the hem of the robe." Okay, so we're now talking about the high priest robe. And surrounding the garments, you would have had at the bottom all these beautiful colors, and then pomegranates, gold pomegranates all the way around. We read this many times, and we don't really think about it. I've always imagined, pomegranate bells or something, a bell and a pomegranate, as it says. But it wasn't until we actually found one of these that we actually can look back at the Hebrew, not the English, and truly understand what's being spoken of here. So I always pictured a pomegranate like this, and then next to it a bell, and then a pomegranate and a bell all the way around, like it said in the English. But in the Hebrew, it can be read a bell in a pomegranate, a bell in the pomegranate all the way around. Now this gives us a little bit of a different picture. And God does everything for a reason. And even just finding it, you pick it up and it goes, it's not enough to just say, okay, well, that's perfect, it's fantastic. God said that for a reason. And there's a certain amount of these bells that are supposed to go around. Don't quote me on this, I want to say 72, 71, something like that, I can't remember, but we can go back and look at that another time. And an expert here in the land of Israel took this bell and studied it, and rang the bell once, and then took that and multiplied it by, I think it was 72 once again, whatever that number is. And because you remember, this is a reason why God does this. And the frequency that is omitted from that 72nd bell omits something that calms human beings, a sound. So the reason why is, think about it, the high priest. The high priest is located in his garbs, or his garments, only at the temple. He doesn't wear this as he's walking around the streets. It's when he's at work. If you, as a pilgrim, have made it to Jerusalem, and next time you come on Joshua's tours to Israel, you'll notice Jerusalem is up hills both ways, anywhere you go, especially when you do Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a city on a hill surrounded by 7 higher hills. And then we've expanded beyond that. So it's always up, down, up, down, up, down. We just walked from the city of David all the way up underground, straight up. So our legs are burning a little bit, which is why I'm talking too much, to kind of let the legs relax a little bit. But the ancient pilgrims would have done the same thing. Now, they have one factor that we don't have. When they're done with walking uphill, they're going to the temple. They're going to go before the very presence of God. They're there for a reason. It's not just a Sunday afternoon to walk to the temple. I'm going to go to the temple for a reason. To be with God. I've sinned. I need to atone for my sin. Whatever the reason might be, I'm there for business. Okay? The high priest is the representation. His job is to represent God, not represent God to me, but help me approach God in a righteous way, because I don't know what to do. So I see the priest and I could start getting nervous. Oh man, it's about to get real. I need to calm down, okay? Because if I don't calm down and I go there, I could miss the moment. And you don't want to come all the way to Jerusalem and miss that moment with God. And of course I can come back again and do it again, but you don't want to miss that moment. So as the priest approaches you, subconsciously, whatever's going on in your mind could be going 1,000 miles a minute. The priest approaches, you hear this sound being emitted, and you automatically start calming down. I can start to think clearly. I can approach the priest. Hi, I need some help. Where do I go for this? And come here, my son. Okay, he probably wouldn't say that. Let me help you, okay? And take you to where you need to go. That's what the priest's jobs are. They're servants to represent God's house to you and help you accommodate whatever you're there for, okay? So this is an artifact that for the first time was found here inside of this drainage tunnel going down to the pool of Siloam. And unfortunately, it was in here because the priest would have been killed in and around this area, and the ball would have fallen down into the drainage channel. Now, we do know that people were trying to hide from the Romans during the destruction of Jerusalem inside of these areas. You know, they're quite big. As you walk down, away from the cisterns, it gets narrower and narrower. And we know the Romans, as we approach the Pool of Siloam, the Romans would start jabbing and dumping things in here to try and kill the people. And many people did die in these tunnels. Whether the priest was in here or he died up above and the ball fell down, we don't know. But this is where we found it. So now, once again, we find something mentioned in the Bible. For the first time, it could fit in your hand. All right, so we are now standing underground at the very western wall. It's not as fancy as the one up above, but nonetheless, these are retaining stones for the western wall. Now, when we say the western wall has nothing to do with the temple itself. So today we call it the holiest site in Judaism, simply because we can't get to the holiest site in Judaism, which is where basically the Temple Mount, or the temple would have been. Today, the Al-Aqsa, or not Al-Aqsa, the Dome of the Rock. So because we haven't been able to go there for thousands of years, first the Romans wouldn't let us in, then the Christians wouldn't let us in, the Crusaders.
And Golda Meir wouldn't let us in.
Exactly. And now it's
Because we
controlled.
took the Temple Mount, and she's like, we'll give it back to them.
Well, we gave it to the Jordanian Waqf, so they control it now. So it wasn't really until recently that Jews were allowed to actually go up and pray on the Temple Mount. So this is as close as we could get. So this is kind of replaced the temple, or as close to the temple as we could get. So it's become our holiest site by that fact. But nonetheless, we are underground, and you can see this isn't as fancy as up top, but this is what it would have looked like as well. And you can see what makes this Herodian, or built by King Herod, is you have it's the green. It's the color scheme going on here. He was really ahead of his time, this Herod. So you can see every single stone has a frame around it, and it's been chiseled perfectly. Now, usually if it's up top, it's flat. You can't see this, but this is underground. Who cares? And he's got, even underground, you can see around it, the frame, you have two frames inside. You have an outer frame, which is this, and then on the inside of the stone, which we don't find here, you have an inner frame. We'll see this when we go up top, because he's once again from the Roman Empire. He's an architect by trade. He wants to bedazzle everybody. He wants you to be wowed. The Roman world's all about aesthetics. Anywhere you go, look at the buildings, look at the people. You have to look good. The building must look good. So that's what he does, and he is brilliant at it. You can see, because this is the Western Wall as well, some people have put notes in here. So there's a lot less notes here because this is a paid site. The Western Wall is free, and it's above ground. This is underground. Now, King Herod, we said, a lot of people say built the second temple.
I just said that because I thought he did.
Joshua just said that.
And most people would say Herod built the temple.
Yes, Herod did not build the temple. He was not allowed to touch the temple. He beautified the temple. So he put gold on the outside of the temple, but he was not allowed to touch it because he was a pagan at heart. So he didn't, although he may have been Jewish, he didn't practice Judaism. He built temples everywhere. But he does expand the Temple Mount, meaning builds the western wall and expands the southern side, the Roman portico, the Roman stoa on the Temple Mount, which is the area where we found those tiles that we saw earlier.
Yeah.
That's where that would have been placed, and makes it a very Roman-style building. Basically expands it to about 20 American football fields, the size of it, yeah. So it's huge up there. and to accommodate all the people that are coming. That's what he does to the temple. Doesn't actually touch the temple itself, though. So this is his baby right here, and you can see how great of a construction it was, because it's still standing today. And it goes way down below us as well. Look, you see the camera pole?
Yeah.
Go straight above it. You see the rock with the inscription?
Yeah. Oh, the inscription, yeah.
Okay, now you can avert your eyes, sir.
Okay.
You don't have to strain. So this is what we have here. It says it in Hebrew, but we'll read it in the English. One of the stones in the wall bears the Hebrew inscription, "And you shall see, and your heart shall rejoice, and their bones like grass shall ... That's where it's cut off.
Uh-huh.
Now you can see it's kind of like high up, not street level, so we know it's not from Second Temple period. Once Jerusalem is destroyed, the first thing the Romans do is they exile Jews, not allowed back into Jerusalem, and that continues all the way through the Byzantine Empire. Then the Muslims come and kick the Byzantines out. For the first time, we're allowed back into the city of Jerusalem.
Through the Muslims.
Through the Muslims. The Muslims are always good to Israel. The Christians are not, unfortunately.
Wow. Historically.
Historically. And we think right around the time of the Persians, Jews are allowed back in. They get so excited, that's about ground level over there at that point. After the destruction, you build up and up and up.
Yeah.
So modern days up there. You get to that area, they're for the first time allowed back to the Western Wall. This is as close as we can get because the Temple Mount's already occupied. They come over here and they carve that into, that's from Isaiah, by the way. They carve it into the stone. They're so excited. They're like, yes, we're back in Jerusalem. This is the time that the prophets mentioned. Whoops, a short 13 years later, out. Just above it, we see the remains of Robinson's Arch. This was a big archway that would have come down and connected with this building over here, the structure, and then it would have been another staircase coming down. So that would have been an entry point.
This right here?
Yeah, would have been an entry point, would have made it to the roof, and then down that way. This building is a Roman 10th Legion bakery. Roman 10th Legion bakery.
Wow.
Because every good military has to have its bread source.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a meal in the ancient world without bread. So you sit down and break a loaf of bread, have a meal. That's what it means. But this structure right here, or these series of structures, is Second Temple period. These are shops, entryways into shops. Now this is reconstructed. So what that means is if this is the Temple Mount and these are shops, this road that we're standing on is what we call the Herodian Road. This is the marketplace of Second Temple period.
So do you think Jesus or Yeshua walked on this road?
Not only do I think it, I know it. Anybody that you read in the New Testament or even before on their pilgrimage up to Jerusalem would have been walking on these very stones.
The road.
This is the road. And what this means, this is the marketplace. The reason why this is so close to the Temple Mount is we have to, remember, it's business. If I'm going to the temple for something, if I'm bringing an offering to God's house,
Yes.
I'm not going to carry a goat from Greece. I'm not going to carry a goat from Egypt. I'll just bring the money with me and I'll buy a goat locally or doves locally.
Yes.
And because it has to be without blemish. I don't know that it'll be without blemish from walking long distances.
I don't know, I'm getting excited, but is this, maybe you're going to go there. Was there an argument between my rabbi?
Well, we don't know.
Sellers, maybe here?
We don't know.
Okay.
So this could be. It says in the temple. Now this whole area,
Okay.
this whole area is the temple. We know there's nothing being sold on the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
So, by default, this could be the place.
Yeah.
But we don't know for sure.
Or at least one of the markets
Yes,
nearby. I mean,
exactly.
This is the picture.
Now we
really.
do know there are money changers here because, according to tradition, you have to pay. Everyone comes from around the world. You have to convert your money to buy here, and you also need to buy a half shekel for the entrance to the temple. Now, not everybody has half shekels. The priests sell them here. So these stalls could have been used to sell your goats, to sell your doves, money changers, buy your half shekel, buy your chicken for your chicken dinner tonight, whatever you want. This is that ancient marketplace.
Oh my God.
So whether you're coming here for the temple or you're coming here for dinner, this is the street that the disciples, Yeshua, and anyone else would have been walking on in Second Temple period, up until the destruction. Now you can see the remains of the destruction of the temple.
Wow.
So if this is that main street and this is the Western Wall, when the Romans destroy something, they do a good job at everything. They build fantastically, they destroy even better. They want to make a point, and especially when it's a rebellion, because it's not a point to the Jewish people, it's not a point to Israel. It's a point to everyone else. If you revolt against the Romans in our empire, this is what's going to happen to you. They make an example out of you. So they take our holiest site and they destroy it, absolutely destroy it. But it's not enough to destroy the temple. I want to destroy that Temple Mount, because remember, 20 football fields is huge, right? Well, unfortunately, it's all built out of stone and they can't take down a mountain. So what they do is they push the big stones from the top down. So if you look down at this wall,
what that did.
that's what happens here. You can see a pile of stones over there, and all of these stones over here are from that western wall or from the Temple Mount, yes. We'll talk about that in a second, but those stones up there making the pathway over there came from this area. So if we have the marketplace here, it's got its counterpart on this side. You can see the remains of the stalls. They would have come out into the street as well. So you have stores on both sides lining all the way up and all the way down. Now this is what destruction with stones, when stones fall down, go boom, that's what happens. And there's bigger holes over there. There's just excavations
It's like equal to a
going on.
rocket fire, like
Yeah.
boom.
So if you look at these stones, if you can find the smallest stone here, and the smallest stone in the western wall is actually not located here, but the smallest stone here weighs 1.5 tons, the smallest stone.
Oh my God.
So look at these. These are the, towards the corner are the big boys. Look at the size of that. These are the stones that are falling down that are creating this massive hole in the ground here. Okay, so just pushing stones over will cause a lot of damage. Now we start to find stones like this all around the area, specifically in this southern southern part of the Temple Mount. These are stones that we think came from that royal store, the royal portico area, which would have been just above our heads and going all the way from the west, where we are now, to the eastern side, towards the Kidron Valley. And it would have been a big Roman-style building, nice shade in the summertime. It's very hot. Looks nice and cool now, a little chilly, but the summertime is miserable in the sun. So you're still going to come to Jerusalem, you're still coming to God's house, but at least in this way, you'll have some sort of shade. That's what King Herod does. That's the beauty that he brings. He makes it look like a nice Roman building, but he gives you shade as well, and you're still at God's house. But this stone here is quite important for our biblical story. This is clearly a cornerstone. Now, this is all original except for this stone right here, which you can see has been cemented in. The original, take a guess where it sits.
Smithsonian.
Close. It's right next to the Holy Grail. No, it's the Israel Museum.
Israel Museum.
Israel
Oh,
Museum.
yeah, that makes sense.
Smithsonian.
They actually cut it off, or it was broken?
No, they cut it off because they wanted to preserve it. Now, if this is the cornerstone, that means it fell from the southwestern corner, straight above our heads. Now, why did we leave this stone and move all the other ones? That's a great question. You're a wise man. Because you can see on the inside here is an inscription. And not only is there an inscription...
The Beit... What's it? Fei?
Kuf? Ha? Bet? Ha? If you need a little help reading it, it's right here as well.
The Beit...
Lebet Hatkia.
What's it? Kia.
Oh,
yeah.
Lebet Hatkia. Lavdil ben Kodesh lechol.
Wow.
Now, for anyone who speaks Hebrew, when we talk about ben Kodesh lechol, this is a language that's only used with the Sabbath.
Yeah.
And we say it every single Sabbath when we light the candles to separate the holy from the mundane.
Yeah.
Okay, so today we use candles to represent what's being done here. There's a clear-cut time that God has appointed to spend with us and us with Him, and we have to mark that time by something. We light candles at home. Your wife lights candles at at your home. But back then, the priests had to let everyone else know, guys, Sabbath is approaching. Now, I don't know about Perea, but here in Jerusalem, every Friday at a certain time, a few hours before the Sabbath enters, we have all the loudspeakers in the city, from the schools or from our alarm systems for missiles, has nice music playing.
Yeah.
Which means exactly what this is. Guys, the Sabbath is approaching. It's time to wind down. If you're at the marketplace, shut down the stalls. If you're here buying, go home. And you're on the southwestern corner, so if you remember, Jerusalem is located south and west, meaning this whole area is where Jerusalemites are living. So if you stand there and you blow your trumpet, and it's a silver trumpet that would have been blown, everybody and in the marketplace and in their homes would have heard, guys, the Sabbath is approaching. Let's go wash our hands. Let's get ready for Shabbat, because it's our time to celebrate with God. It's our covenant day with God. So this is a very important stone, because not only do we know it came from the temple, we have a little niche that's carved in. The priest would have stood like this with a trumpet, and he would have blown it into the marketplace to let people know, guys, let's go. Time to go home. Let's get down to business here.
Yeah.
So this is an original stone that fell from there. So we left it here so people could see it, so we could see, once again, the evidence that there was a temple, in case that's not enough for you. And what exactly it was used for. This is the priesthood spot. One of the priest's jobs is to let the people know the Sabbath is approaching when it's time. Yeah, pretty cool.
That's amazing. So Shabbat Shalom, guys.
Now today we have Joshua comes with his ukulele and sings Shalom. Oh, 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 oh.
Shalom, shalom, Shabbat shalom, shalom.
Okay, so we've now made it to the southern side of the Temple Mount, and this is also known as the Southern Steps. Now you can see Joshua and I both sitting on the Southern Steps, which is quite fantastic. Some of the steps are original, some are not. The one that we're sitting on, you can see, is very new. And the one that our feet are on are the actual original steps. The reason why is these are actually starting to fall apart, and with the water and the rain, they're very slippery. So they built new steps so that people wouldn't fall and sue, basically. But nonetheless, these are the original steps that were here in Second Temple period. Meaning, we were just on the Herodian Street. When you go to the marketplace, you buy your half shekel coin, you buy your doves, your goat, whatever you need for the temple. You do your mikveh, your ritual immersion bath, and then you make your way up to the temple. Guys, these are the very steps that everybody would have gone up on their way in.
Okay, but did Jesus, Yeshua, walk on these steps?
I would have to say yes, because this is the only way in.
That's amazing. It's
Isn't
crazy.
it? And
It blows my mind.
It's fantastic. And if you go through the scriptures and you read what happens in and around the temple, it's all happening in this area. You know, most of the end portion of Yeshua's life takes place in Jerusalem. The last week is here in that mountain over there. So much of what we read on a daily basis, or however long it takes you to read the Bible, happens in this area right here. I mean, we could walk it in half a day. And it's just so much packed in these scriptures. Now, one cool thing about specifically where we're sitting, this area is called the Huldah Gates, named after the prophetess Huldah from the First Temple period. It's called that because it says that she's buried south of the Temple Mount. We're south of the Temple Mount. We don't know where here, so maybe at one point there was a tomb, but nonetheless, the prophetess, mind you, her name is given to the gates. Now, right behind us, you can see the remains of a little archway. That is a reconstructed remains of the exit of the Huldah Gates. This wall that you see that was built here was built much later on in history to close off the city of Jerusalem. So that's a Crusader wall.
Okay.
And it was there to close off Jerusalem so that it was a walled city. Remember, Second Temple period is much larger. Jerusalem really reached its peak under Jewish rule. So when we're talking First Temple, Second Temple, and Second Temple later on really is when it was at its fullest up until 1967.
Okay.
1967, Israel takes over, reunifies Jerusalem under one nation, and it's the largest it's ever been in history. But up until that, you know, countries and empires come and take the city. It's a stopping point on your pilgrimage or on your trade route. It's nowhere anybody wants to live. Like I said, it makes no sense to live here. It's uphill, downhill everywhere, so much conflict. no great source of food. Why live here when you can live in Tel Aviv? I still say that every day. But there's the spiritual aspect of the heart and soul of the Jewish world. The heart and soul of God is this Temple Mount right behind us in this city that he said he put his name on.
And he said he did that forever.
Forever, for all eternity. This is his house on earth.
Yeah.
He's not changing his mind. God never changes his mind. Back to our location. So we have the Hulda Gate over there. This is the exit, like I mentioned. On the other side over there, you can see 3 arches that have been reconstructed. They're not original. Actually, none of this that you're seeing is original because the temple was destroyed. When we get to the top, you'll start to see some original stones, but the smaller stones are all later empires. Specifically, at the bottom part, we get to Ottoman and up. But you have those 3 gates, also called the Hulda Gates. That would have been the entrance into the temple. Now, the reason why you have a separation is if you think about it, let's say 2 million people are coming to Jerusalem for the feasts. We're all going to one place. You come not for Jerusalem, you come for the house of God. Yeah. So we all have to go up there. That's the point, the reason we're here. If you don't have a way in and a way out like a road, it's going to be chaos. Now, there is one exception to the rule. That's the way in. But there are individuals that do enter in this side. And the Bible tells us if anyone is in a state of mourning, today we call sitting Shiva. It's a state of mourning if you're grieving the loss of a loved one. Then you are not to enter like the rest of Israel. You are to enter the exit. The reason why is, remember, we're a nation. We're going up to God's house. You might be Gentile. I might be Jewish. We're still one with God. I'm going through the exit because if I'm going through the exit, you walking out, no, there's only one type of person going in here, and that's someone who's grieving. It's my job to comfort my brother.
Wow.
What's going on, brother? Tell me, how can I help you?
Yeah.
And he goes in, and if you have, let's say, 2 million people going in and out, you're going to have, let's say 10,000 people stop you and comfort you on the way in. I mean, that's showing someone love. That's feeling God's love in God's house, You can't look at any other culture, any other temple in the world where you have people approaching you and helping you grieving with you as one body, as one with Messiah. And that's the beauty of what God does at his house. There's reconciliation, there's comforting one another. I mean, if you look at Yeshua, Yeshua means salvation, but he's also known, he's got many nicknames, and one of them is the Comforter. I'm going to God's house for comfort. That's what my Father gives me. Well, that's what happens here. Before I get to my Father, my brothers will help me be comforted on the way in to the Comforter.
Wow.
Yeah. I was telling Joshua how, as a tour guide in Israel, this job becomes repetitive and very mundane.
You've been doing a lot of touring the last year, haven't you?
Oh man, so much touring on my iPhone and
Dang. COVID.
You're my first tour this year.
Oh,
Look
yeah,
at that. Yeah. So COVID. But I listened to a pastor, I won't say his name or where he's from the States, read this, and something inside gave me a huge check. And since then, I get pumped up, fired up anytime I go to a place like this, Jerusalem, the Galilee, anywhere I know that our forefathers would have walked, anywhere I know Yeshua would have walked.
Yeah.
I just feel the tradition, the blood running through me of, wow, I get to do this every single day, every single week.
Yeah.
And hopefully you guys will be able to come here and enjoy this very tradition with us in person soon. So I'm reading, this is just a newspaper article, but back a long, long time ago, Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon, was a devout Christian, and he came to Israel and on a pilgrimage to follow the footsteps of Jesus. And he was taken around here by the lead archaeologist at the time. His name was Meir Ben Dov. And I'm going to cut halfway through the article and start reading. It says, when they, which is Meir Ben Dov and Neil Armstrong, got to the Hulda Gates right behind us, which is the top of the stairs leading to the Temple Mount, Armstrong asked Ben Dov whether Jesus had stepped anywhere around there. I told him, look, Jesus was a Jew, recalled Ben Dov. These are the steps that lead to the temple, so he must have walked here many times. Remember, 3 pilgrimages a year. Armstrong then asked if they were the original steps, and Ben Dov confirmed that they were, these steps right here. So Jesus stepped right here, asked Armstrong. That's right, Ben Dov said. I have to tell you, Armstrong said to the Israeli archaeologist, I am more excited stepping on these stones than I was stepping on the moon. There's no way to explain it. There's something spiritual that happens when you make this pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Jesus, Yeshua, made the journey from the Galilee, not too far away, but still a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. You guys are coming from the States, actually make it here a lot faster than Yeshua would have coming from the Galilee on an airplane, but nonetheless, you're making the exact same pilgrimage to Jerusalem. You're partaking in the very same thing that everybody has done for thousands of years. And there's something that happens to you. You connect with the land, you connect with the people, you connect with the tradition, you connect with God when you come here. God is very faithful back then, today, and tomorrow, and forevermore. When you take the opportunity, when you take the sacrifice, I mean, you know, to walk from wherever you're going to Jerusalem or to fly from the States, it's time, it's finances, it's a lot of effort involved. If you make the sacrifice, God will meet you. God will do something and you will feel it. That's a Benny guarantee. It's a Benny guarantee. I've never met someone that came to Israel that wasn't touched in some way.
The sun is out. It's been a cold morning, but it's so amazing. My wet shoes are drying. And speaking of wet, maybe you've heard of baptism. Maybe you have been baptized, God willing. But we're standing in front of something pretty cool you're going to see in a second. It has a lot to do with baptism. But if you think about coming up to the temple, the Bible says, who may ascend to the hill of the Lord, but he who has clean hands and a pure heart. But you actually had to be holy, you need to be washed, ritual bath, baptism, a ritual bath before you went up. And you came here on Sukkot, Passover, and Shavuot, or you might call Pentecost. These are the three mandatory festival feasts where you had to make Aliyah. You need to come up. Aliyah means going up. You need to come up. So, Ben, you're mentioning about these little pools of water here. Any significance biblically about the pools of water?
Absolutely. Let's pull out our Bibles / iPhones. Acts chapter 2, verse 1. The festival of Pentecost or Shavuot arrived, and the believers all gathered together in one place. Suddenly there came a sound from the sky like the roar of a violent wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. Then they saw what looked like tongues of fire, which separated and came to rest on each of them. They were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to talk in different languages as the Spirit enabled them to speak. Now they were staying in Jerusalem, religious Jews from every nation under heaven. I'm going to stop here really quick. So the one thing I want to talk about here are a few things actually. It says the Feast of Pentecost. Remember, everybody from around the world is coming to God's house for these three pilgrimages. Now, a lot of times if you've been to Israel in the past or Googled any of this stuff, there's a place over in what's called Mount Zion that's called the Upper Room. And it commemorates the Last Supper and it commemorates this event here.
Yeah.
I personally don't believe that this event would have happened over there. I do agree that the Passover would have happened over there, but I don't think the Pentecost event would have happened over there. And there's a few reasons. You have to look at it through Jewish perspectives, through Jewish goggles, if you will. And if it says the Feast of Pentecost arrived and all the believers gathered in one place, there are a lot of believers, guys, at this point. They're all coming to Jerusalem. If you've been to that room or anybody's house.
120, I think, is enough the room, right?
Yeah, I can't fit 120 people in my house, let alone that small chapel or room, whatever it is.
People didn't have big houses.
They
here,
did
unless
not.
you're lonely.
We had what's called a 4-room house. That's 3 bedrooms and a common room. That's about it, you know. Most of your life happens outside. You sleep in the house, everything else happens outside. You don't need a big house, unless you're Herod. So, if they're all gathered in one place, it can't be someone's house like that. On top of the fact that when you come to Jerusalem on a pilgrimage, the focal point that we mentioned before is this house, God's house. We're all going to go to one place. I, as a new believer, may not know where that house is, but I do know, because I've been here many times before, where God's house is. So to me, it would make more sense, since we're on a pilgrimage festival, to come to God's house. And then it says, suddenly there came a sound from the sky like the roar of a violent wind that filled the whole house where they were sitting. It says the whole house that they were sitting. There's only one place on earth that in the Jewish world is called the house. There's Joshua's house, there's Benny's house, there's Sam's house, and there's Yaakov's house. But if I say till today, the house, even in Hebrew, the Temple Mount's not called the Temple Mount, it's called the Mount of the House. The only house on earth that's called the house is God's house. So when it says here they were gathered in the house, it's specifically mentioning that, I think, in a Jewish terminology, a Jewish way, to let everyone know that we're talking about the one site that we're all going to, the one house that we all know where it sits, God's house. That's the focal point of the pilgrimage. We're here for God. We're here to commune with God and with each other. And we all know the rallying point. It's going to be God's house. Then it makes more sense when we continue to read what's happening here. Because if you remember we'll fast forward to the very end, and after the very long sermon that is given here, verse 41 says, so those who accepted what he said were immersed. And there were added to the group that day about 3,000 people. Now, Joshua mentioned this whole baptism thing. Baptism comes from a Jewish ritual called mikveh, or an immersion. John the Baptist, that's what he's doing. He's not really baptizing, he'd be better known as John the Immerser, one who's doing a mikveh. Now, in the archaeological world, we have a rule. If you find one immersion bath, one mikveh, the whole site is Jewish, because we're the only ones on earth that are doing these immersions. It's what we would call a Jewish thing up until the Christian world takes on baptism. The difference is in the Christian world, you get baptized once. We do immersions nonstop. It's a sign of a new beginning. You know, before you get married is the only time you're really commanded to do a ritual immersion, because it's truly a new beginning. But when you come to faith as well, other than that, if I open my own falafel shop and I want to dedicate my work to God, I'm going to run this falafel shop to the best of my ability through God's, showing God's love and mercy and be faithful to Him and run it not cheating people, putting any, rocks in the falafel balls and not charging too much. I'm going to do a ritual immersion bath. That's a sign from me to God that I'm starting a new chapter and I'm dedicating this to you, God. It's a personal thing. I don't have to tell anybody. I do need one witness. So you're going to come with me, be my witness, and potentially help me if I need help. But here, behind Joshua and myself, we find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 ritual immersion baths. Over there we find about 5 more. In this whole southern steps area, in the western wall area, we find over 150 ritual immersion baths. So remember, if one city has a ritual immersion bath, it's a Jewish city. If we find 150 in this small proximity, this screams something ritual is happening, something Jewish ritual is happening here.
It says they all believed and were, well, in English is baptized. Immersed.
Yeah.
There's no place, is there any place else that it could have happened?
One town, one mikveh. This is the only place that can accommodate it. Because remember, before you enter God's house, you must do a ritual immersion bath. So to have these many baths is to accommodate God's house, which is why I think all these people, believers and non-believers, are gathered on their way to God's house. But the only site that has that many ritual immersion baths has to be this area.
Wow, and I'm thinking about when these people arrived, they said all from the languages around the world. So God gave them tongues. So basically the world was reached in that moment. In that one sermon in Acts chapter 2, the whole world, the world's Jewry, the Jewish people from the world were here and heard the good news that Messiah has come and his whole purpose in coming, the kingdom on earth. They all heard it in their own language. That's right. And they were baptized. And it happened here. That's right crazy. Right this is where the world was impacted on that day, Acts chapter 2. From right here.
From right here. And then they take that message back to where they came from and continue doing what they do over there, bringing people to the Lord. So this place is the starting point for everything, really.
Well, we've ascended to the mountain of the Lord, and behind us is what many call the Wailing Wall, but it's actually called the Kotel.
Yep.
Ben, you could tell maybe a little more about it?
The Kotel is just going to be your western retaining wall. So this is that same wall that we were walking next to earlier, connects to the southern wall, which is the southern steps area where we just came from. And this is above ground over here. So we're actually only looking at 7 levels of the original Western Wall. The rest are all reconstructed from different empires and up. So this is that place that we talked about that has really replaced going to God's house, to the temple, because it no longer exists. This has been the strip that's always been accessible to the Jewish people during the Muslim empires, but not during the Christian ones.
Okay.
So this has become that pilgrimage site nowadays for Jewish people from around the world.
Yeah, and it's become holy for 3. Actually, this section of ground is
This
holy
section-
for 3.
The 3 major
three
religions,
major religions in the world.
yeah, absolutely.
Of course, one. Well, the other 2 came from the one.
Yeah,
Really, when you think about
absolutely,
it, they all
absolutely,
came from
absolutely.
from the God of Israel and His promises, and then we kind of developed our own things. Muslims really developed their own thing.
Yeah, completely.
But Christians who read the Word of God know that it's the same promise if we're grafted in the proper way through Messiah, Yeshua. I love bringing my sons here. I say my sons because my daughter has to go to a separate place with my wife. The women are on that side and the men are on this side. And I have 4 sons and 1 daughter. So my sons, I'll always recite that prayer, who may ascend the hill of the Lord, he who has clean hands and a pure heart. And then they do the Natilat Yadayim, the washing of the hands. There's a prayer that you pray. You pour it over your hand, I think twice in the right, twice in the left, and you finish on the right hand. And it's this idea of coming up with clean hands
Yep.
and a pure heart. Who may ascend the hill of the Lord? We're on the hill of the Lord.
That's right.
So it's a very literal, and the Bible is literal. I mean,
Very.
this is the hill of the Lord. So this idea of going over and washing your hands, a ritual washing, which is what I do with my sons when we come here. And then going down, we don't pray, just so you know, we don't pray to a wall.
No,
I don't think any Jew would say, I'm praying to a wall. They're actually appealing to Hashem because His presence was just on the other side of the wall
Yeah.
where the temple was. But you know in the Bible, His presence was there.
Yeah.
So I get it. But we know the Holy Spirit came, 2,000 years ago over there in the southern steppes
That's
we're
right.
talking about.
That's right.
And He dwells within us. So we don't go and pray to the wall.
No, not in
But I
any way.
think you might agree too. Part of me is like, take that mountain again, Yeshua. Come on
Absolutely,
back.
absolutely.
Part of my prayer is that, and praying for the nations that they be prepared
That's
for it.
right.
And one other thing, if you know some people walking backwards, it's a custom, right?
Yeah.
To maybe you could explain that.
Sure. So the different destructions of the temple are attributed to different things. And the second temple, we say, was destroyed because of, we call it free hate, meaning we hated each other, our brothers, and basically turning our backs on each other, which is turning your back on God. So in order to show an outward show that we won't turn our backs on God again or on each other again, you'll see people will go to the wall and then they'll retreat like this. At least take a couple ceremonial steps backwards and then continue. Some will go all the way back up the ramp until they leave this complex backwards, just as a sign that I won't do this again.
Yeah.
We did it once and we're still feeling the repercussions of what happened because we still don't have a temple.
So never turning our back
Yeah,
again.
that's right.
I like that custom.
I like it too.
I actually do it most of the time. Not always. Sometimes I forget.
Might be a little dangerous today.
I might walk into some of those cubicles,
That's right. Capsules.
COVID capsules.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're gonna go down to I'm gonna go down to the cocktail now.
Yeah.
And,
Take up
just
prayers.
prayers. Not to the wall.
No, to
God.
God.
The God of Israel.
Okay, so welcome to the Via della Rosa. We're standing just outside station number 1. Via della Rosa means the way of sorrows or the way of the cross. And these are the stations that are set up by a combination of biblical scripture and church tradition, all incorporated into the stations of the cross that we know it today. Now, the first station is representing where Antonia's fortress would have been, the trial of Yeshua. And we know Antonia's fortress was on the northwestern side of the Temple Mount, which means we are now on the northwestern side of the Temple Mount. And today, Antonia's fortress is a children's school, but nonetheless, it's located right in this area here, which means straight behind this building is the actual Temple Mount. So we're on the ground level of the Temple Mount currently, all right? So let's continue. We'll take a look at the markers of the Station of the Cross. and you'll start to see Roman numerals as we stop.
Cool.
Cool. So just on the other side of this door is station number 2 of the cross. They're closed today, so we cannot go in. But station number 2 is the flagellation of Yeshua. It's also called Yeshua takes up the cross. This is traditionally where they would have taken Yeshua, tied him to a pole, and whipped him and beaten him. So there's a pole in there. It's half a pole on the ground, a pillar. That is the station number 2, and that's the flagellation of Yeshua. And then after this, where he takes the cross and he continues walking along what we call today the Via Dolorosa. So let's continue. Okay, so we're standing in front of station number 3 and station number 4. Station number 3 here, you can see that the art is telling us what it's commemorating. This is Yeshua falling for the first time while carrying the cross. And station number 4, you can see here as depicted, is the first time that he meets his mother while walking on the Via Dolorosa while carrying his cross. Remember, when we walk through, we're going to see some biblical events and some extra biblical events. Okay, so here we have a perfect combination we're going to start to see as we walk along the Via Dolorosa. So you can see we're standing in front of station number 5 of the cross, and station number 5, according to the depiction there, is where Simon helps Yeshua take the cross and carry part of the burden with him. So let's continue walking along the Via Dolorosa. So now we're standing in front of station number 6 of the cross, and this is one of our extra biblical events. This is where Veronica wipes Yeshua's brow. As you can see, she's doing on this model up top.
Is that a tradition? I don't know what Veronica is.
Yeah, me neither. It's not in the Bible. Tradition. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we're standing in front of station 7 of the cross, and this station is commemorating Yeshua falling for the second time on his journey. So we will continue through the busy market on our way to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre now. Okay, so we've finally made it to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is situated right behind me. Now, what we're seeing today is not what the Church of the Holy Sepulchre would have looked like back when it was built by Constantine's mother, Queen Helena. It would have been built in a Byzantine style, which would have looked a lot more like one of the famous temples that they had in Rome all around the country, actually, and all around the Roman Empire. But it was, throughout the centuries, changed to look like this today. The final phases were put on by the Crusaders, and that's what we're looking at. This entryway here that we see has nothing to do with the Byzantine world and everything to do with the Crusader Empire. So this is an entrance that you would find into many Crusader structures all around the country of Israel and all around Europe as well. Now, inside of the church, we have different denominations controlling different areas. And this has led to many conflicts throughout the centuries. We're not going to get into conflicts. We just want to talk about what we see inside. So you step into the Catholic chapel, and it's a beautiful scene that they depict. All around the ceiling, you have mosaics, and the mosaics are all connecting to one picture. All the mosaics have little pictures of biblical stories, biblical themes, connecting in a grapevine. It's a very biblical theme, all going to the cross. At the very end of the chapel, you have a depiction of Yeshua being nailed to the cross. This is the station of the cross. Yeshua nailed to the cross. Then you take a few steps over to your left, and now you're standing at another station. This station is controlled by the Greek Orthodox. The Greek Orthodox venerate things in a different way. So whereas the Catholic will have the mosaics telling you the story, and that's it, the Greek Orthodox have icons, they have altars, they have these beautiful golden and silver lamps hanging all over the place. And then you make your way over to Golgotha itself. That's the mountain, that's Yeshua being crucified. So just like I said, that's Golgotha, also known as Calvary inside. And you can't access the mountain today. It's hidden behind glass, although there's one area where you can put your hand down and touch it, and to feel the indent. And according to tradition, this is where the cross was put into the mountain. Whether it's not, it's true, guys. This is all up to you to decide. We have many conflicting stories. I'm just telling you what's inside the church and the story here. Okay, when you're done with Golgotha, you go down the staircase and you make your way to the next station of the cross, which is directly behind the doors over here, and that's called the unction stone. The unction stone is part of a Jewish tradition of when someone has passed away, before you can bury them, remember before Jesus was put in the tomb, you have to clean the body. The body is cleaned and rubbed with oils and wrapped in either a prayer shawl or a shroud. And then you can take the body and bury it inside of the tomb. Now, Second Temple period, you have a few different traditions of how to bury, and one of which, the more common one, is taken from the combination of a Jewish burial and a Roman-style burial. So there's two burial systems, and everyone that is buried in a rich man's tomb is going to be buried in the two-style system, meaning I die, my body is cleaned, I'm wrapped in a shroud or a prayer shawl, and then I'm put on a bench to decompose, basically. At this point, I've done my duty, or whoever's burying me has done their duty. I'm considered buried. That's the Jewish tradition, okay? Now, adding on to the second part of this, it's called the second burial, is when you come 1 year to the death of that person. Let's say my children will come and they'll collect the bones that are left inside of the prayer shawl or the shroud, and they'll put them in a little box. The box is the size of the longest bone of the body. It's called an ossuary, and this is called being buried with your fathers or your forefathers. Inside this box are my bones, my father's bones, his father's bones. You're basically being buried with your forefathers. So they take this and then it's put in the family niche, okay? And then when my children die, they'll be buried the same way. And then the second burial will be put on top of my bones. So this is the process that Yeshua would have gotten, except 3 days later, he was no longer in the tomb. He had resurrected. But nonetheless, this is a rich man's burial, and we see inside the beginning process of the rich man's burial, never to be completed. All around the tomb itself, you have what we call a poor man's burial system. Is just niches in the wall where people are set in, and then you have benches all around as well. All right, so that's basically what we see inside, completing the Via Dolorosa on the inside of the church. And today, like I said, it's controlled by 7 different denominations.
So Benny is a good friend of mine and lives in J-Town.
That's right, local.
Also known as Jerusalem, right here.
Jerusalem.
So tell us a little bit about your story, how you came here, and not the tour guide version, the shorter version.
The shorter version.
Under
My parents moved
under 3
here.
minutes, under 1 minute. I'm kidding.
Under 1 minute.
I'm kidding.
Oh man, I came, I saw, I never left. My parents immigrated in 1980, before I was born, and for Zionistic reasons, Jewish, wanted to live in the land, felt drawn to the land of the Jewish people and the God of Israel, and unfortunately had to go back to the States after that. But I was born, came back a short while after that, and moved around the country, but pretty much was raised here. When I was about 15 years old, we went back to the States, and I finished off high school there, college, and came back 11 years ago.
Okay.
But that was the shortest version ever, but I will expound a little bit.
Please do.
That's
too short.
Yes, way too short. That's the fastest I've ever done it. You know, there's a big difference between living in Israel and living in the States, specifically the States. You know, life here is kind of hard, especially in Jerusalem. We talked a little bit earlier about the difficulties of living in the land, the pressure, the wages aren't as high as abroad. We call it the land of milk and honey, but it costs a lot, man. It costs a lot. It's abundance, but you got to pay for it. But it's worth it. But when I moved to the States, you kind of fall into the trap of easy, you know? I call it fast food culture. Everything's easy, accessible, and it becomes the norm. And I just kind of got hooked into it, you know, and I didn't have a reason to come back. Throughout the whole thing, I sort of walked away from God, not really, but in my own way. And about 6 years after moving there, I just felt God begin the draw, the call back to the land. But the beautiful thing, about God is you can always listen or don't listen. He gives you the option.
Yeah.
So I didn't listen for a very long time, but he did not leave me alone. He continuously pursued me. And one thing led to another, and I finally moved back to the land of Israel in 2010. But once I got here, I left a very good job. I was moving on up in my career in the States and moved back home to Israel, moved in with my parents at the age of 28. Not easy to do. Love my parents to death. Still single at the time. And, I was just kind of looking for the next chapter, what God wanted me to do, why he brought me back. And it took about 2 years for me to figure it out. One day my good friend called me up and said, hey, I'm thinking about going to tour guide school. Now, I love history and I love the Bible. And the night before that, I was also looking into tour guide school, unbeknownst to him. And he just out of the blue called me up and I said, well, let's look into it together. And kind of got roped into that with him. But throughout the schooling, I didn't really quite commit to the tour guide thing. But the beautiful thing about traveling through the land is, although you're learning about what we call history, modern history, but it's our history.
Yeah.
It's my ancestors did this. There's a connection, Yeah. And as you study about the land, the people, the history, you're connecting with your ancient roots, but also with the God of your ancient roots.
Yeah.
And I slowly felt myself, getting closer and closer, God drawing me closer and closer into him and to the land. And I don't know, man, this land's got a tight grip on me. And you have to eventually move out of the parents' house. I did, not too long after that. And you have the choice. Where do you want to live, And there's many, many beautiful cities, many possible opportunities. But there's something about Jerusalem. Now, besides the convenience for me for my job, in and out of the city, in the center of the country.
Yeah, most tours is like 4 days. The end of the tour is in Jerusalem.
Yeah,
4 days.
the bulk of it's Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So it's easy to go home at night, and it's an easy, quick trip to the airport and back in the middle of the night. But there's a spiritual aspect to it as well. My ancestors lived here. God's house was here. There's a connection. And it's also the last place I lived before I moved to the States, so I had all my childhood friends here as well, who now have all moved to Tel Aviv like normal people. But there's the connection, the drawing here. And I felt called back to the land of Israel, back to the city of Jerusalem. And, this is where God's had me so far, and I don't feel the need to leave. I don't think he wants me to leave yet.
Yeah.
And, it's the beautiful thing about the hill country in Israel is in the same day you could have rain and you could have gorgeous blue skies an hour or two later. Unlike you guys in the Galley just sweating 24/7.
Just suffering with the sunshine.
Oh, yes.
So what about your faith? Did you come to know Messiah at a young age? Or how old?
Yeah, so I was born into, and praise God, born into a Messianic family. My father was a rabbi here in the country, Messianic rabbi, so I always had the faith. And thankfully, my parents did a very good job building me up in it.
His parents are awesome. I love your
Agreed.
I love your parents.
Agreed. Me too. They did a great job. Like I said, the thing that broke me was moving to the States. They didn't break me, but it took a short journey for myself, learned who I was, came back. But I was always very much grounded in my belief in God. And like I said, I didn't even realize I'd sort of walked away until I was looking back at my life.
Do you feel like you walked not away from your faith, but your calling maybe?
Oh, definitely my calling.
Yeah.
I do believe I was never, we were supposed to go to the States when we did, and I was supposed to come back when God told me to come back, and I didn't. That was where I missed. Remember I said 6 years in, he said, come back, and I didn't. And, a short 11 years later, I was back here. No. quick stopover in the States, but no, he brought me back. He was faithful to me, and I finally heeded to the call, came back, and it's just been blessing after blessing after blessing since I've been back. So I know it was him, clearly knew it was him, and I now reap the rewards. About 2 weeks after I moved back to Israel, I met my wife, my future wife, yeah. Although I didn't know it yet. She knew it, but I didn't.
Whoa, that's
but
awesome.
it's just one, and then, continuous blessing after blessing, so.
Yeah. And you got 2 blessings now.
I got 2 little blessings now at home. Hopefully more soonish. I hope she's not watching this.
Well, you've been one big blessing to us.
Well, thank you.
And our groups that have come, and this group right here right now. So thank you so much, Benny. Thanks so much for
Thank
an
you,
awesome
Joshua, for
Jerusalem
having
day. I
us.
hope you guys had an awesome time.
Thanks for
and-
joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys. And we hope you can come here personally someday.
Yes.
But until then, we're glad you joined us here virtually, right here in Jerusalem. What a great 6 days of touring, virtually touring Israel. I have the honor and the privilege of doing this. It's been my absolute privilege. I hope you've been blessed by these 6 days and by these 4 amazing guides. You know, the Bible says, he who scatters Israel will gather Israel again. And we're living in those times, the times of the ingathering. I'm one of those. My mother was born here, right here in Haifa, Israel, but then moved to America. Her mother fled the Holocaust and came here where my mother was born. But I knew growing up in America, someday I needed to come back. And it's good to be back. And I'm honored to be a bridge to you and help share Israel, at least through my lens, through this lens, to share Israel with you. And the same can be said for our guides. I know a few of them have been born and raised here, a few transplanted, and are all about bringing the light of Yeshua to this nation and the light of Messiah to the nations as well. One thing I think about very often is the reality. This is a real place. There's a lot of religions out there. You know, there's one prophet who just over there, they worship him, and he was a terrible person to children and God knows what. But our prophet, our rabbi, came as Emmanuel, God with us. And the things he did, it's real. It's real. You've seen it. Yes, there's nothing like coming in person, but you were able to see it. This is the sea that he walked on, not just on the shore line, on the actual lake. Two-thirds of his miracles happened all around the Galilee area. It's just incredible, the reality. You go down to the Dead Sea where we found the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you got to see those places where those caves were preserving those things. Sure enough, we dig those scrolls out. It lines up with the scriptures we already had today. What we believe doesn't require blind faith. It requires faith. The Bible says that, I think it was Paul, went on proving through the scriptures that Yeshua was the Messiah. He actually used the Old Testament because the New Testament wasn't written yet. He went on proving through the scriptures that Yeshua was the Messiah. Well, this very same word of God that spoke about things that had happened, things that are happening, speaks about things that will happen. It talks about the fullness of the nations, the fullness of the Gentiles. And it also talks about, Yeshua himself said, you will not see me. He said this in Israel before he left this earth. You will not see me until you say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So I want to invite you guys to welcome our King back to planet Earth. We're going to do our best to welcome him back here to Israel. But I want to say thank you so much for joining us. If you liked it, please share it with your friends for our next month's tour, just joshuaaaron.tv/virtual tour. We'd love to share Israel with more people if we possibly can. And I hope it was a blessing to you. We've been reading your comments and it's been a blessing to us to see how much it has blessed some of you. So we're just so honored you join us, and thank you again for joining us right here as we worshiped right here in Israel. We're not done yet. We've got one more event for you coming up next week on Sunday, a live time of communion, and we're going to visit one last special place. So don't leave this site, and don't forget, all this stuff is available. Come back anytime after these videos are done and visit us again. So I will see you this Sunday for our very last special event. So God bless you.